I think part of the problem with a lot of churches is, and pastors won't say this out loud, but we think we're the big deal.
Yep.
And we also preach some Jesus. And I
Woo.
think if we would have the posture of, I'm not a big deal, but Jesus is,
Yep.
it would fix so many issues
Yep.
in the Western church today. If
Yep.
we would just approach life with that posture. Because even theologically, if I will just live my normal everyday life with that posture of, I'm not a big deal, but man, Jesus is.
Yep.
Man, it's going to help my marriage. It's going to help my relationships. I'm going to be a better boss, everything gets better if I have this daily dependency on Jesus, not just in my words, not just for my preaching, not just for the big meet, whatever it is,
Yep.
but just in my normal everyday life. And I think that's what creates a healthy leader.
Hey, ReLeader family, I'm so excited that you're joining us today. Today, we have a special guest on our show, Pastor Mel Masengale. He's a dear friend of mine. He's one of the best ReLeaders I know, and I can't wait for you to hear what he has to say. So welcome to the show. Mel, I'm pumped you're here, man.
Honored to be invited and be a part. Thanks for having me.
I think it's awesome that you just happened to be in town, so we were able to figure
Do
this out.
this live, sit down together and talk. Yeah, it's way better than technology.
Way better. So for the listeners, Mel and I have been friends for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
No, almost 13 years.
Yeah.
Coming up on 13 years.
Yeah.
Mel and I were on staff together at Victory Church. And so before either one of our ReLeader journeys began, and we'll get into Mel's ReLeader journey in just a minute, but before my ReLeader journey began, we were both campus pastors at Victory Church.
Yeah.
And so we were ships passing in the night for a few years, and we got to work together. We just became great friends. And then right before what we call D-Day at Victory Church, not too long before that, Mel left and went to PA.
Yeah.
Went to Pennsylvania. What? Pennsylvania? You went from Oklahoma City
Yeah.
to Pennsylvania.
I felt the same way at first, to be perfectly honest. So yeah.
Man, I want to dig into that. Mel became the pastor of Summit Church in Indiana, Pennsylvania, not the state of Indiana.
That's correct. So it's funny. I've talked to people when I have an opportunity to speak once in a while, and people will say, "Oh, hey, is that because is it Indiana, Pennsylvania? Because it's on the border between Indiana and Pennsylvania." And I'll say, "No, that's Ohio. Ohio's on the border between Indiana." So it's like, you went to public school. I can tell. But yeah, we had no, when we were in the process of leaving Victory, we had kind of made a hit list of where would we like to live? God, if in your grace, you would allow us to go anywhere. And it was the hill country, or, let's go back, move back to Austin or something like that. Maybe Tulsa. And,
Tulsa.
I've got a lot of friends in Tulsa. I love Tulsa. So we had good experiences there. And so we had thought about all these places, but I can tell you rural Western Pennsylvania was not on my list anywhere.
But it is a really beautiful area. I've been there.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
You guys get beautiful snow.
Yeah, and for people who love to hunt, I mean, it's lots of hunting. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this. We have black bear around our church that we've seen from time to time, stuff like that. So it's country. Yeah, so we're kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Well, man, I really want to get into some of the weeds of your ReLeader journey because you've done such an amazing job. You've doubled the size of that church, more than doubled it. And so all of our listeners are ReLeaders in some capacity. They may be in the business world, they may be in the medical field, they may be in education.
Sure.
They may be pastors and ministers, but there's so many principles about ReLeadership that are applicable to across all industries.
Yeah.
So when you got there, one, what was some of your biggest concerns? Like what were you, this was your very first lead pastor. You've been a campus pastor, now you're stepping in to be a lead pastor. No one knows you. The church is already there. The staff's already there. The core values are already there. The board's already there.
Yeah.
Like, what were some of your biggest concerns going into that, would you say?
I probably had a naive confidence because I'd come from a larger church at Victory and led in a larger context, that I thought, okay, this smaller church, because, when we got there, it was about 500, which for Pennsylvania, that's a good sized church.
For Indiana, Pennsylvania, that's a massive
especially
church.
for Indiana. And so I probably had this naive confidence, like, okay, we got this.
Smaller church, no big deal. Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate how hard it would be to shift culture. and I didn't appreciate how resistant people are to even good ideas.
Wow.
And so there were some things that were some easy wins. Just functionally, we didn't have any small group ministry at all. We didn't, our worship ministry was schizophrenic. We didn't have a pastor, so we had just different worship leaders. So I could hear the worship set in my office when they were practicing and I knew who was leading because of the songs they picked. So we had 4 or 5 different worship leaders that rotated through. So there were some easy things that I just went, hey, we're going to hire a worship pastor. They're going to make this consistent. They're going to bring us where we need to be. We're going to start small groups. So there were some easy things like that. And it was, I've told people often, because they'll ask, like, what's the secret sauce? Or, man, your church really grew. What did you guys do? And I'll tell people, we were exactly what the church needed, but the church was exactly what we needed as well. So it wasn't like we got there and we saved the church.
Wow.
As much as we might have saved the church saved us too.
Wow.
So it was just a perfect fit. So there was some low-hanging fruit that was really easy to go, hey, this is not going to cost us a lot as far as credibility goes, and this is an easy win. So this makes sense. Let's just make these changes. But a lot of the big changes, the cultural shifts, it took a little bit of time, and I didn't anticipate how long that was going to take.
Well, we talk about on the show, we talk about systems and situational things to discuss as well. But one of the things we try to talk a lot about on the show is just me as the ReLeader, right? My soul, my heart, and you know, we talked a little about this off camera, was when you were a campus pastor at a large church, you kind of become a little known, right? People recognize you outside the church, and how that can have an effect on us, and how God did a purification process in your heart there before you ever went to Indiana, Pennsylvania, and how that set you up, right? So let's dig into that. Like, let's start back from the beginning when you started feeling this euphoric feeling at times, right?
So when we came to Victory, it was a large jump as far as attendance and influence, all those kind of things, people we had access to. And there was definitely a culture there that I'm blue jeans and t-shirts. I'm pretty low key, and they are not blue jeans, or they weren't at the time.
My predecessor was not.
No.
Yeah, he was always sharp.
They were cool, and I'm not cool, and so there was some of that at first. But what I realized pretty quickly is, hey, people are going to recognize me because I'm on the platform all the time.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was at the grocery store one day getting milk. And the guy that was running the dairy section, he stopped me and he goes, Pastor Mel from Victory.
You're Mel.
Yeah. He goes, you do grocery shopping? I was like, bro, you think I got somebody for that? Are you kidding me? Like, yeah, of course I do grocery
campus
shopping.
Pastors, right as we hop off the private jet, someone goes to get our groceries for
us. That's right. So it was just funny. I was like, of course. And so we just talked. And that was, I mean, I'd been at Victory a month. Or something like that. So fast forward about 6 months, and I had interviewed, our friend Jared Wilkins.
Yep.
We literally were interviewing. He and Shauna were standing with me in line at Starbucks, and he said, do you get recognized a lot in public? And I go, no, it really doesn't happen that often. On cue, somebody from the drive-thru starts screaming through the window, Pastor Mel, I go to Victory. We love you. And it was like, you know. But I literally went home that day and told Kim, when they said that, I realized how dangerous that is for my heart.
Yeah,
it scared me.
My office smells of rich mahogany as well.
Right. I have many leather-bound
It's intoxicating.
Books. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And so, I told her, we just talked about it, and she said, I've been feeling the same way.
Wow.
And, I told you, it's kind of like when you're driving down the road and you're in a zone and you run over the rumble strips and it kind of snaps you out of it. I think the Holy Spirit kind of snapped us out of it. And so we talked about it, and we decided that day, we're never going to need a church worse than a church needs us.
That's
because if I need the church for my ego or for my paycheck or for anything like that, if I ever need to go, I'm not going to because I need it.
Yep.
And what's going to end up happening is where I might be helpful right now, at some point, if I need the church more than it needs me, then I'm going to become unhelpful at some point.
That's right.
I'm going to start hurting the organization. And so for us, we just decided then and there, and it really freed us up for the rest of our time at Victory to lead in a way that was honoring to the leadership above us, but was very personalized where we could say, hey, we can be us and I don't feel pressure. And so when we fast forward
you never did start wearing skinny jeans, Mel.
I didn't.
I applaud you for that.
That's one of the great tragedies in American culture is obesity crisis with skinny jeans. You combine those two things, it's horrible.
Oh man.
So no, I never bowed to that pressure. But the great thing is when we got to Indiana, smaller church, but it's a lot of the same problems, issues, things like that.
In some ways, even more. Like, it's one thing to be a campus pastor and be recognized. When you become the lead pastor, that temptation, that intoxicating sensing is amplified, right?
Yeah.
The difference between playing an acoustic guitar and then plugging it in and it goes over the speakers. So it's the same thing. It just is amplified in that way.
Well, and the problems that a celebrity pastor has, those are in every paper and you can Google it and find it and all those kind of things. But it happens in small churches too. Pastors fall in love with their own success or the accolades of the people, whether you got 1,000 people in your church or 100 people in your church, whether you're leading a Fortune 500 company or you've got 20 employees, it's easy for us to fall into that. And we can all have huge egos.
Yep.
So the great thing was that we carried that out. And, I told you earlier, the first 5 years I was at my church, we lost at least one of our top 3 givers every year for 5 years.
Wow.
And we did not have a large budget when I went. And so for $60,000 or $120,000 to walk out the door was painful. And it was every time it was over stuff I could have changed. Hey, if you just change this, we'll stick around. And because I understood, hey, this is not my church, this is God's church. Hey, I'm not trying to make anybody happy.
Wow.
I'm secure in who I am. It made it really easy I shouldn't say really easy. It made it easier for me to go, man, God bless you. I hope that works out for you. And every year we've seen financial growth. So even when we had, I'm not kidding when I say this, one year we had $120,000 walk out the door with a couple of families, a parent and their kids, and we still had 20% growth financially that year in spite of that. And I think it's just a testimony to go, hey, are we trusting ourselves or are we trusting God?
That's right.
And it's easy to go, well, I'm good. Everybody's telling me I'm good. Listen to my, everybody's saying it. And I'll look at all these likes I get on social media, my sermon quotes and, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it really is about, hey, this isn't mine. This is God's.
Well, we don't realize how important those heart work that God's doing on our heart, because it's not just about the now.
Yeah.
It's about where he's wanting to take us next. And if we go into the next with a heart issue, it's going to control us. I know you were telling me the one story of somebody who simply came to you and said, hey, I would like to see us sing more hymns. Right?
Yeah.
And how easy would that have been for you to say, no problem.
We're going to make one tweak.
We will sing one hymn every other week just for you. So we don't have to lose 120 grand a year or whatever it was. And not even to do that would be wrong, right? It's not like it would be some evil thing to sing more hymns.
Yeah, correct.
But because your heart was right and you weren't doing it, you weren't pleasing man, you were trying to please the Lord. And it's just such an important thing for all leaders to hear, to focus in on, and to know that there's always some work that the Lord's wanting to do in my heart.
Well, and it's easy to talk about this on the backside of it, because our church has grown, things have been good. But man, my first weekend at Summit Church, the church had been running about 500. And my first weekend, I think we had 646 my first weekend. And so I thought, I literally walked away.
We're crushing
weekend, like, I'm going to kill this. Maybe if Craig Rochelle's lucky, I'll let him write the foreword to this book because it's going to be incredible, man. And then week 2, I think we had 407 week 2. And so I effectively drove off over 200 people. I thought, and so I was riding high after week 1, and after week 2, I was crestfallen because I was just thinking, these people hate my guts.
Oh man.
And so over the first 6 months or so, we probably lost 250 people of the 500 that were there, but we were picking people up. So you didn't feel it as keenly. But man, I got so much hate mail the first 6 months I was at the church. There was a lady who wrote a 10-page handwritten front and back page, by the way, letter to me, and she sent a copy to the board as well. And it was just outlining how ungodly I was, how unbiblical I was. She wasn't even sure I was a Christian. I mean, it was insane.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because anybody that's stepping into leadership, I've written about this. It's in the book. I don't think I've done a podcast on this yet, but I'm gonna. This was big for me too. When I first came in, we have this. Even I had this thought of, I got this.
Yeah.
You know, there's always a bit of imposter syndrome there. Like, I'm going to do a podcast on that in the future. But there's also this, God called me to this, let's do it. It's the competitive side in me. I played college basketball. Let's go win the game.
Yeah.
Right. And then you step foot on the court and the other team hits 6 threes in a row and you're down, 18-0. And so there's always this humbling process. And I think it's important for leaders to go into organizations wide-eyed, right? Knowing that this isn't going to be easy.
Yeah.
And people are not going to like me, right? And it doesn't give me a license to just give everybody the burden, do whatever I want. But it's good for my heart to know that I'm about to experience rejection, which is so hard when people reject you. And so similar situation when Victory Church first had its D-Day, right? And the announcements were made about moral failure and things like that with my predecessor. Church was packed, dude. Like, I remember thinking, we fixed it. I'm here. We got this. What I later realized is that everyone goes to the hockey game to watch the fight and to the NASCAR race to watch the crash. But nobody sticks around to watch the car be repaired, right? Yeah. So when you come in, everyone's showing up just to check out this Mel guy. I heard he's here. Let me check him out. And while you're talking, everyone's picking you apart. He's not wearing skinny jeans. I don't like his beard. I don't like his voice. Yeah. Whatever, right? And so there's this mass exodus. And what we're left with is what I would call the remnant. And sometimes the remnant is super depressing.
You're like, could some of you have gone with the others?
Why did you stay? Dadgummit, everybody that I wanted to leave didn't leave, and everybody that stayed. Yeah. So what was that like, man? How did you process that?
It was hard at first because all of us want to be liked. No matter who we are, we want people to like us. And when they are actively exiting our church, then it doesn't feel like we're very well liked for good reason. So one of the things I had to do is I had wise counsel that just reminded me, hey, Jesus was the Son of God and couldn't keep 12 guys happy. So how in the world you can keep 500 or 1,000 or whatever the number is? That was a good reminder. Something else I had to remind myself is, hey, if Rick Warren or Jesus Christ himself would have become the pastor, he would have gotten the same letter.
Right.
So it's not really even about me. It's about, the
pain
process, the pain. It's about all these other things. And so that helped me detach a little bit and kind of divorce myself from it being so personal. Yeah. But we were very intentional about how we loved those people. Because the funny thing is, I kept all of the hate mail and I went through it a few years ago just because I'm crazy. And so I started going through it, and all the people that wrote us hate mail, except for one, are still a part of our church.
No way.
And and so we just intentionally loved them.
Wow.
And so the lady that wrote me the 10-page handwritten letter, I would be talking to somebody and I would see her out of the corner of my eye in the lobby, and I'd go, hold on one second. And I would turn and go, hey, it's great to see you today. Love you. Have a wonderful week. And at first I did it almost to spite her, to be honest. I knew I needed to, but it
felt good too to just, hey, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere.
That's right. But honestly, it was a discipline for my heart. I knew I had to. And so it was amazing how my heart started to come into alignment.
That's really good.
And so we just loved them. And so our staff, even though they barely knew me, they were saying things like, well, you need to say something, or do we need to post something, or should you say something?
Bring correction. Yeah.
And I said, nope, we're not going to. And so with every person that wrote me a letter, I would just say, hey, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about this. Can we sit down and work through this? And none of them did. And so I just said, okay, that's your choice. But I just continued to love them. And so the lady that wrote the 10-page handwritten letter is one of our best volunteers. She serves all the time. She's involved. And she came to me a while back. We're looking at starting another location in a rough community, and she has a heart for that. And so she came to me and sat down and just said, hey, if we do this, I think I want to be involved. And so we were talking through it. And I said, I'll be perfectly honest with you. 10 years ago, I would have thought this conversation never would have happened, because we've never talked about that stuff. We've never brought it up. And she just dropped her head and she said, Pastor, I'm so glad you're the pastor here. If you weren't, my life would look totally different. So thank you.
My God.
And I'm sorry that I acted the way I did. And I said, you know what? You were hurt, and and we just had this like cathartic moment.
It's why a leader's or a ReLeader's heart is so critical.
Mhm.
Like if you had an impure heart or insecurity,
Mhm.
like you may have lashed out. You may have replied to that letter.
Mhm.
You may have kicked her out of the church, whatever it is. But look at the restoration that took place
Yeah.
because your heart was whole. Not to say that you always get that right, but in this
Yeah.
instance, your heart was right.
Well,
and you kept a soft, pliable heart, right?
The ironic part is that some of the people that were the most welcoming when we showed up did not stick around.
Wow.
And so I think even for, take it out of the church context, if you're a business leader, whatever it might be, you're inheriting a team, some of the people that might be the biggest pain in your rear end when you show up, if you just steward them well and take care of them well and treat them as humans, they might end up being your best team, your best teammates, your best employees, your best, whatever it might be. Because the natural reaction is just to go, well, if you're not with us, you're against us, get out.
Yep.
And so I'm thankful that was a process that God had to work in my heart. But
I wrote a little bit about this in the book, but when Zerubbabel was rebuilding the temple, the Bible says they rebuilt the foundation. And then it says that some of the people that were present, like they're kind of having this moment of celebration. We finished the foundation, right? Which doesn't seem like you would celebrate. You don't normally pour a foundation in a building and everyone's like, yay, you just poured the concrete, right? So they build the foundation. And it says that people gathered and there was such wailing that they couldn't decipher the cheers from the weeping. Like some people were super upset and some people were happy. And, because there was people present that had seen the former temple in all of its glory. And so they see the foundation and they're thinking, wait, this isn't right. We're not building this right. This isn't going to look the way that it did before.
Yeah.
And then there's other new people that are like, oh, this is amazing. We're rebuilding the temple. And it's so much like that when we step into leading an organization. We have to be sensitive that there are people there that have been there for 20 years, 10 years, 25 years, and you're not the guy, right? In their eyes, you're different. You're not the guy. But man, how important it is to just love those people. Yeah. Oh, I had somebody come up to me 3 or 4 weeks ago. We had released the book and I was signing the book in the lobby, the ReLeader book. And some lady walked up to me and she said, hey, Jon, you don't know me. When you became the lead pastor here 9 years ago, I left the church. I didn't like you. I didn't think you were the guy. And she said, I just started coming back about a month ago. And she said, I just want you to know I'm sorry that I left. I should have never left. And we don't understand the pain people are walking through, the hurt that they have. And I just love that story, that particular story. Somebody wrote a 10-page handwritten letter against you. And now she's one of your top leaders. Yeah. This is the story of David. David's in the cave of Adullam, and the distressed and the wounded all come to him. And he freaking loved them. He had to have. He led them. He loved them where they were at, and they became warriors in his army.
And that's a great example of, I think, God calls us. God puts a calling on our life, and we think it's got to look a certain way. So when God anointed David was anointed to be king of Israel. And the beautiful thing about what David did is he was in the cave and God sent him people and he didn't say, no,
these aren't the right people.
These aren't the right people. I'm supposed to be leading in the throne room. I'm supposed to be on a throne in a palace.
I've been anointed king.
Right.
Why am I in a cave?
But he said, man, I'm going to be faithful to do what you called me to do right here in this place where I don't feel like leading very well. And I really do believe the nativity of his kingship was actually in the cave. 100%. Because if he hadn't done that, he wouldn't have been qualified to lead in the
that was his preparation.
Yeah.
And I love this idea of the remnant. And I'm going to do a podcast on this. I don't know.
Are you making a list of all the podcasts?
I am. In my head, I have a list of podcasts.
Somebody writing this down.
But think about the power of the remnant.
Yeah.
I mean, Gideon went from 32,000 to 300. I mean, I know my church shrunk when I became the ReLeader. Yours did, but I didn't lose that many people.
Right.
Like, you talk about depressing. This dude went down to like 1%.
And they were already outnumbered at 32,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what God did with the remnant. I mean, and that's what I think. I do have a section in my book where I talk about don't focus on who left,
Mhm.
focus on who's left.
Yeah.
And what I begin to realize in at least my leadership journey, and this is applicable to education, wherever you're at, wherever you're leading, every time somebody would leave the church, I would get so depressed
Mhm.
and I would feel so rejected. And especially people that you poured your life into. You went to the hospital, you did their wedding, you did their funeral, you did whatever. And then just like that, they leave and you feel betrayed.
Mhm.
And you feel like there's a piece of your heart that leaves. And I would start to focus on who left. And I would focus so much on who left that I would turn my attention to who was still there, and I would try my best to make sure they didn't leave.
Yeah.
And so before I know it, I'm a people pleaser.
Mhm.
Before I know it, I'm
Yeah.
pretending to be something that I'm really not, you know. Instead of just saying, okay, who's left? Let them go.
Mhm.
Now, who is left? Who's left here for me to pastor?
Yeah.
And let me just pour my heart into these people. So I just love that thought. I love that thought.
Well, and how much insecurity do I have to obsess over the people that have left? Because no matter what I do, people are going to leave.
Yep.
And it's usually rooted in, and you kind of alluded to this idea that, hey, I did for them. They owe me.
They owe me.
And when I can settle in my own spirit, hey, the people don't owe me anything.
That's the
I
key, right?
I get to be the lead servant. Okay, that's what we're
Mm.
called to be as pastors. And the servant doesn't get to demand of the people he's serving, hey, you owe me.
That's
I did
so
this
good.
for you. You owe me. So that's
And not
where-
just pastors, leaders,
absolutely
right?
of any color, you're supposed to be serving. And so when I understand, hey, they don't owe me, that makes it easier to release them, or easier for my heart to be healthy when they do go, because they will go. Because I mean, I've told our church 1,000 times, every relationship is seasonal. There's a season for every relationship.
That's right.
And if I can understand that every relationship is going to end at some point, and hopefully, like with my wife, it's going to be, at an old age in my death. But
Yep.
but if I understand nothing is permanent in our relationships, it makes it easier to go, all right, man, bless you.
Bless
You're
you.
going to another church.
That's
I'm glad
great.
you're in church. God bless you. Or we release you, man. The door's always open if you want to come back,
Yeah.
instead of, well, I'm going to unfriend you, and I'm going to unfollow you, and I hope I never run into you. And
So going back a little bit to this idea of what we talked about earlier, this intoxicating feeling whenever we're noticed, right? We've seen it happen in leaders, right? Where over time, that elixir of attention is intoxicating, and it has an effect on us over time. And here's what we talked about this too. It could be at a church of 100.
absolutely.
Like there's nothing about it. This can only happen to megachurch pastors. A guy pastoring a church of 100 can have his own intoxicating experience inside the bubble of that 100 people. So what can we do? What can we do as leaders to shed that off? You referred to the bumpers in the road, those moments where the Holy Spirit wakes us up and says, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute, that is not what I need to pursue." Like, I know our spouses many times are that for us. My spouse keeps me humble. Hey, how's my sermon today, babe? Wasn't that good?
Yeah. Our kids could
Our
be
kids,
that as well.
right. But what are some other ways that we can, which one, honestly, is one of my biggest, not fears, I don't want to use the word fear, but in some ways, I don't want to ever become that.
Yeah.
So how can I continually eradicate that out of my soul?
I think for me personally, the key is to try to keep a larger perspective, because if I am zoomed in just on my context and all I'm hearing is the feedback in my echo chamber,
Your fishbowl.
then it makes it real easy for me to be in that place. But if I am soliciting opinions from people I trust spiritually outside, people that will actually say no to me, or people say, no, that's a dumb idea, or why would you do it that way? That helps me stay a little more humble. When I understand, again, zooming out, understand that, hey, I might have a lot of notoriety in this bubble, but if I take a step outside of this bubble, nobody has any clue who I am.
That's exactly right.
And I think that's humbling for us, because if we're going to be honest, I mentioned Craig Rochelle earlier, who's a great leader, and he's known outside of the church world to some degree, but there's a whole bunch of people in the church world that don't know who Craig is.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And so,
If he went to Silicon Valley,
yeah,
if he went to, the medical industry, whatever the case may be, there's always a bubble outside
Yeah.
of our bubble.
So I
is your
think
point.
just understanding that, hey, I'm not
I'm not
really
big of a deal.
that special. When I was in high school, my basketball coach, after a bad loss, he would say, "Guys, there are 3 billion Chinamen that don't give a rip that, and like, all right, there's some truth to that."
Okay, yeah. Not the end of the world.
Yeah. And so I think having that kind of perspective, not just when things are good, but when things are bad too.
Yep.
And I've had to talk and we've been blessed to be able to speak into a lot of leaders of small rural churches just because of where we're at geographically. And I've had to talk some leaders off of the ledge and go, hey, let me ask you a question. Does your wife still love you today?
That's exactly.
Well, yeah. Okay. Do your kids think you're awesome? Yeah. Like, well, who cares what your board member thinks?
Who cares?
Like, you're going to survive this, I promise.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to have some external voices that can speak into us, when we're low and when we're high, that will help us.
Having the self-awareness to notice those things in ourselves.
Yeah.
And reminding ourselves, I'm not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But also having other people in our lives that will tell us we're not that big of a deal, in a sense, right? And they're at times to lift us up and at times to, in a sense, tear us down in a healthy way.
Well, I mentioned my girls, right now they're 21 and 18, and neither one of my girls, super involved in church, both called to ministry, love my wife, love our church, love Jesus. They've never asked me what our attendance was on a weekend.
Wow.
I was just curious, what was our attendance this weekend? They don't care.
They don't care.
And it's important for me to remember, like somebody might ask me at a gathering somewhere, so how's your church doing? Which we all know that's code for
how big is it?
How big's your church right now? And so it's important to surround ourselves with some people that don't care about that stuff, that really just care about your heart, care about you.
5 years ago, 5.5, almost 6 years ago now, but whenever Michelle and I came to the DFW area to be with TKU, we've talked numerous times about how it was one of the most healthy things for us because of this very reason.
Yeah.
That we went from our bubble and we went outside of our bubble into a massive metroplex where no one cares who Jon Chasteen is. Like, I am nobody, right? And how healthy that was for us to, we get in our fishbowl and we may think whether your fishbowl is, everybody has a fishbowl. And
it
inside
might
that
be
fishbowl,
300.
Exactly. And whatever size your fishbowl is, there is a fishbowl in your life that you're kind of a big deal in, right? Even if it's just in your family, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's so important to get outside of our fishbowls. And we don't like to do that because it's super humbling. And there's almost, if you've ever been in a room with a lot of people that are bigger than you, right? It's very like, I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here. But a part of that we should embrace, right? We should embrace, I'm nobody in this room. And that's okay. And it's actually really healthy for me to be in a room or be in a city or be in a church or be in a community where I'm not a big deal. I need to be thrown into another fishbowl where there's other fish that are way bigger than me. And it keeps me humble.
And man, we could go on a tangent about this, but I think part of the problem with a lot of churches is, and pastors won't say this out loud, but we think we're the big deal. And we also preach some Jesus. And I think if we would have the posture of, I'm not a big deal, but Jesus is, it would fix so many issues in the Western church today. If we would just approach life with that posture. Because even theologically, if I will just live my normal everyday life with that posture of, I'm not a big deal, but man, Jesus is. Man, it's going to help my marriage. It's going to help my relationships. I'm going to be a better boss, everything gets better if I have this daily dependency on Jesus, not just in my words, not just for my preaching, not just for the big meet, whatever it is, but just in my normal everyday life. And I think that's what creates a healthy leader is humility, and that humility drives us to the cross to go, okay, Jesus, I can't do this without you. I'm an idiot. I'm not as smart as I think I am. I'm not as smart as these people say I am. So I need you to show up. Holy Spirit, you got to give me some direction.
There is this idea, and again, I'm going to do a podcast on this, but there is this idea that if we could pump a leader with truth serum, every one of us have moments of imposter syndrome.
Sure.
Where imposter syndrome, for those that don't know, it's just this. It's a psychological term, but it simply means that I feel like an imposter. I mean, I feel like
they're going to find out I'm a fraud.
Only if they actually knew that I wasn't a great leader, that I wasn't the dad they think I am, that I wasn't whatever fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And so we can actually embrace that and receive God's grace through our weakness, or we do the opposite and we superimpose, or
Fake it
we
till we
fake
make
it
it.
till we make it.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, this generation that's coming up behind us, they can sniff that out so fast. And what they're after is vulnerability, honesty. They live in a world of pretend through social media, through their phones, and they're so hungry for just somebody that's real.
You know, we endeavored a long time ago, my wife and I did, that we were going to have the same marriage publicly as we do privately.
Yeah.
That I was going to be the same person on the platform that I am at home. Just keep it consistent. And we did that primarily for our girls, because I didn't want my girls to have whiplash, you know. And I've got preacher voice on the platform that I come home and I act like a godly man, but then I'm screaming at them, you know, those kind of things. And I really do believe, because that's been how we've endeavored to do ministry. So today the community we're in is about 10,000. We have a university of about 8,000 in our community. And we have a lot of college students that show up. We have, and it's because of what you're saying, because we're not perfect. We're never, if you want cool church, it's never going to be our church, but this is who we are. And if you're cool with this, then awesome. And so we have people that show up to our church all the time that they don't really love our worship, or they're not crazy about my preaching necessarily, but they love that we're just who we are, that we're just authentic. And I think that's so important for us to understand, that we don't have to be like the business next door, the church next door, or there's lots of ways that we can be successful in God's eyes. And really the number one way we're successful is by being faithful to do whatever he's called us to do. That I don't have to be Victory Church, or I don't have to be Gateway or Life Church or any of those churches.
That's right.
Man, God just wants me to be the most authentic, faithful version of Summit Church in Indiana, PA I can be.
That's really good.
So
when you first got there, let's circle back to for ReLeaders. When you first got there, what would you say are were some of the hardest things for you? And even going in, piggybacking off of what we just talked about with vulnerability. Like, there are people listening to this podcast right now that just took the job as a VP, just took the job as a director, just took the job as whatever, and they didn't start the department, they didn't start the company, they didn't start the church. They're a kids pastor, they're a youth pastor. Somebody was there before them, and there might be similarities in what they're feeling that we felt when we were first coming in. Like, you know, we get up in front of staff and we say things. We get up in front of churches and say things. We get in front of boards and constituencies and clients and whatever. But we go home and we're wrestling internally, like with things. It could be self-doubt. It could be logistical systems. It could be anything. What were some of those things for you that you were on the inside wrestling with? How do I do this? And can I do this? And am I capable of doing this? Or it could just be like, no, I know I need to do these things, and how do I do them?
I think for me, it was less about the nuts and bolts of, man, I got to figure out just how to actually do this. And it was more about the tension I had between the pace I wanted to change at and the pace we could change at.
We talk a lot about that.
And so I had a hard time with that.
Because you want to go.
Because I see, and this is a good leader will have vision for the future and be able to look down the road. And so you've got to manage that tension between looking down the road and still managing where you are well. And saying, hey, in order for us to get down the road, we got to handle this stuff well. And so that was a struggle for me.
Me too.
And I didn't always get that right. One of the things, even back at Victory back in the day, one of the things we talked about there was, I think one of the things we didn't do well when we were on staff was we didn't lead through change. We described change, we announced change, but we didn't lead through change. And so that was something that I didn't do as well as I thought I did. And that didn't manifest itself till I'd been there probably 4 or 5 years. And I had a board, and I didn't realize it until, man, I've got this tension with some of my board, and I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from. And when we just had some real honest conversations, I realized, oh, I changed the way we're doing things, and I didn't even know that I changed the way we were doing things. So
what would be some examples of that? Would you say?
So after we had these conversations, I went back and looked at the old board minutes from before I came. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. The church was a church of 400 to 500, but they were making decisions in the board meeting about hey, we're going to have this flyer in the lobby. What color
What
font
color?
should we use? Or what? They were literally going through this stuff in board meetings.
Like real board material. That's good.
So the board was deciding this kind of stuff on a granular level. Wow. And then I show up and I move it from the granular level to this macro level where it's high level.
Where it should be.
Yeah. But they weren't used to that because they liked having control. They liked having say. And so it would have been easy for me to go, well, they're bad because they want control. Well, no, that's just what they were used to.
Interesting.
And so it manifests itself in this like mistrust at times. And well, why are you mistrusting me? And then I come to find out,
you realize later.
It's because I didn't lead well through the change. I just changed. I just assumed this is what we always do. And I didn't even investigate and go, well, what were we actually doing? What decisions were you really making?
That's a great example. It's like you had to do an assessment.
Yeah.
Or you should have, right?
I should have. Yeah.
Nehemiah shows up to rebuild the wall and it says that he rode around and looked for the weak places. He looked for the low points.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a great step in ReLeader before we just jump in and go.
It would have saved me a lot of issues, honestly. Interesting. Because
that's fascinating.
2 of the 5 board that were on the board when I came are not even part of our church anymore. And I'm this is going to sound arrogant. The things we talked about in the interview process is exactly what we're doing. So I'm doing exactly what we talked about doing.
Yep.
But there's a disconnect between what I said we would do and us actually fleshing it out. Somewhere along that way, they went, nah, I'm out. I can't.
Interesting.
I can't go with you. And even though I was very clear about where we're going and we're doing it.
Yeah. They wanted to be in the weeds.
Yeah, people don't argue with the vision. People get on board with the vision.
It's the how.
It's the how, right?
100%.
And so that was the thing. It was like, well, okay, we want to see people saved. Well, we do too, but we don't like how we're seeing people saved. So
that's a really good point.
So for me, that was a big thing I wasn't ready for. And we kind of talked about people leaving. It's one thing when people leave. It's another thing when staff leaves. And so I underestimated how
bigger impact.
I underestimated how badly my soul would ache when I had invested in staff.
Those hurt way worse.
Oh, not even close.
Way worse.
I've got friends that are part of our Back 40 network that they will say things like, man, I wish I had a staff like you. And sometimes I look at them and I go, I wish I had a staff like you.
Wow.
You got no staff. And so it would be easier if I didn't have anybody working for me, but
easy to have a staff meeting.
Indeed. You don't have to schedule time. And
you don't put it on the calendar.
But some of our deepest wounds in ministry have come from people that we've employed because they're the closest.
100%.
And I tell people this all the time too. The only way to avoid that is to never love them, never be vulnerable with them, and you will be fine. You'll never be hurt.
Which is why a lot of leaders lead that way, because they're avoiding pain. It's a defensive mechanism to avoid pain because they've experienced some pain in the past. So it is a temptation to lead that way.
Well, I had a high level leader that I love. We've talked about that. He was with me a few years ago, and he said, man, I wish I had a relationship with my staff like you do. And I said, why don't you? Well, it's just, we're bigger and it's hard. And when we boiled it down, that's really what it was. He'd been so deeply hurt by his staff in the past that he just keeps them at arm's length, and it makes it easier. If you got a terminator, if they leave badly or whatever, it's like, well, okay.
It didn't hurt as bad because we were close.
They're a cog in the wheel. They're,
Well, you can't wish relationships into being. I wish I had what you have. You can't. Relationships are one of the least things you can wish into being. It's time, it's hard. And even the ReLeading journey, we've talked a lot about this on the show, is if you're wanting to go up and to the right really fast, like ReLeading may not be for you. ReLeading it's a marathon. It is a slow. Now there are seasons of growth, and not to say that we can never experience explosive growth. We can, but what you said is perfect. It's not, I can see where we need to get to, but the how is way more, I can see the straight line, but the actual path is more of a zigzag.
It is.
And a step back and a circle and a loop and then up and then back.
And the truth is, if we grew like I want to, like my ego wants us to,
you wouldn't even be able to
couldn't even manage it.
You wouldn't sustain
like we would be back to where we are right now in no time because I'm emotionally, spiritually not ready to lead at that level. Our systems aren't ready, all that kind of stuff. So that's where again, it comes back to some humility and being secure enough to go, all right, we're not as big as that church, or our business doesn't have as many sales as that business, but we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And
That's
we're
exactly.
okay.
And there's something real pure about that. There's something really, and again, it goes back to a lot of pastors and leaders feeling unseen, unknown, unrecognized in a world and in a culture where if you're not noticed, then you're really not doing the work.
I've thought a few times. We had a conversation a few years ago about an opportunity that was kind of presented to you. And I told you, we were talking about that. And I just said, man, I'm so grateful I've gotten to the place. And I don't know if it's just old age, I've been in ministry long enough or whatever, that it's nice that whenever I get a phone call from a church going, hey, we've got an opening, would you be interested? I don't immediately go, oh, they like me,
it's my opportunity.
I'm secure enough with where we are, what God's called me to be and do, that I don't feel like, man, if we're not in the Outreach Magazine 100, I'm going to lose it. Like, I'm cool if God keeps me in Indiana, Pennsylvania the rest of my life, and I've never speak at a conference, and I never get any notoriety, I never am on a pot, any of those kind of things. I'm cool with that as long as I'm doing what I feel like God's called me to do. And there's something really refreshing and releasing and restful about saying, okay, I'm good with this, God.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever comes.
Because that's where the striving ceases in my heart, where I don't have to worry about, I got to get so many posts and I got to get so many eyeballs on my stuff and likes, and I can just go, okay, God, what are you asking me to do? And I'm going to go do that as faithfully as I possibly can.
Well, you and Kim have done that really well, man. I've seen you guys lead from afar and close up, alongside you as a campus pastor. We've led as lead pastors almost the same amount of time, and you've just done an amazing job. And you are one of those guys that leads as good as any leader out there, and may not be as well known, but there are so many. The truth is, the vast majority of leaders are that guy or that girl, right? And if we can just find that place of rest, I love what Paul said: godliness with contentment is great gain. So if we really want great gains, there's only two ingredients. It's godliness, having a deep relationship and faith in the Lord, and the thing that most of us suck at, it's contentment. If I can just find this elusive thing called contentment, and you guys have modeled that so well. And
well, thanks, John. I appreciate that.
I love what you guys do. If you want to find Mel Masengale, he's not hard to find. Summit Church in Indiana, Pennsylvania. Tell them about also Back 40. Tell them about, so this is a ministry. Are you still doing this ministry, Sam?
Yeah,
or is it?
So we've shifted a little bit, but when we came to Pennsylvania, we realized pretty quickly how many rural churches there were, and rural people for that matter. You don't think about Pennsylvania as being rural. It's shocking how many people live in rural areas. And so, 5 minutes from our church, there are people that have chosen to live without running water or electricity. Because we're literally hillbillies. So it's rural where we're at. And so there are all these churches all around us that have 30 people, and they've got a pastor who has a full-time job, but he's also preaching on the weekends. And my heart was breaking for these pastors because their churches don't care that they're bivocational. They still expect the pastor to show up to the birthday parties and graduations and do the wedding and be at the hospital. And it's like, well, he's got a full-time job and he's prepping a sermon and he's... And so, man, we just said, what can we do? And I felt challenged because there's about 90,000 residents in our county. And I felt just challenged going, God, how are we going to reach all these people? And it was like the Holy Spirit said, you're not stupid. You can't reach all these people. But what if you help other churches reach these people?
That's right.
And so we just said, let's come alongside churches that want to partner, want to work together, just need some encouragement. And, let's do a couple things. Let's connect them in relationship. Let's encourage them, and let's help them last a little longer. Let's help them have some longevity, because now instead of a church looking for a pastor every year, maybe it's every 3 years. And that makes a big difference.
Huge difference.
What if we could help a church of 30 become a church of 60? What if we could help a church of 100 become a church of 200? And now all of a sudden that 90,000, because there was about 40,000 of the 90 that were actively in church on a weekend. And so let's start taking bites out of that. Let's start seeing what we could do. So that's what we did. We would have an annual conference because I would bring in leaders that these guys couldn't normally see. And these are pastors that don't have the budget to fly to Atlanta or Dallas or somewhere like that. So we'd bring them in locally and do some round tables, just different things, just to give them access to relationships and things like that. And so this year we've shifted a little bit and we're doing cohorts. And so we've got cohorts that are meeting throughout the year that we're just sitting down, and I'm leading these, but I made it very clear to them, you're not coming to hear from me. And so what we do is we just ask them to give us, before we get together, give us the top 3 things you're doing that are really bearing fruit, and give us the 3 things that you're really struggling with. And then when we come together, I'll just say, hey, here are the things you guys said you're struggling with. Here's some common, so let's just talk through these. What are you guys doing about? Because then it's not about, come learn from me, I'm the big church. It's about, hey, I'm going to facilitate a conversation between you guys, and the answer, the solution to your problem is in this room. So let's figure this out. And then the other part of it is we're able to go deeper in relationship too. So now they've got somebody to call when they have the problem with their board.
That's awesome.
Not just me, but they've got peers in the room that can go, hey, your church is the same size ours is. And so so we've shifted a little bit. We're not doing the conference this year. But
so if there was a leader or a pastor out there that wanted to get, more connected to you, you don't give them your cell phone number, Mel, but like, what's the best way for them to follow you on Instagram, go to the website? What would be the best?
Probably Instagram. It's just Mel Masengale on Instagram. You can connect with me on the website. summitpa.church is the website. And man, we love connecting with pastors. And one of the things I try to do, so even if a pastor from a different region of the U.S. will reach out, I'll connect them to pastors in the area that I know. Because it's one thing to connect with me 2,000 miles away. That's limited. I'm not going to be able to get lunch with you. I'm not going to be able to come sit with you in your lobby or talk to you in your office. But I bet there's a pastor in your area that would be willing to. And
every pastor needs that.
Oh my gosh.
Need community.
Yeah. So I've got pastors that I pastor, but I've got pastors too. I've got people that are pouring into me. And so, I think every pastor needs that.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate what you do.
I appreciate you, man. You're doing a great job. And I love seeing the fruit that God's bearing in your life as well. So thank you, man. Love you.
Appreciate it. Okay, guys, thanks for listening today. As always, you can go to ReLeader.co if you want more information. I'm writing every week. We have a community. We're really developing a ReLeader community. And you don't want to ReLead by yourself. And there is a community out there at ReLeader.co where we discuss, we have Zoom calls, we have community where we iron sharpens iron, we sharpen each other. Also, the book is out. If you have not picked up the book yet, it's called ReLeader, How to Fix What You Didn't Break. It's on Amazon. If you buy it on Amazon, please review it. Hey, share this podcast with your friends. Give comments and stars and likes on the podcast itself. It helps in the algorithms to get it out to more people. Love you so much. Thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for ReLeading. Thanks for leading in the shadows where no one sees you doing it. It's fruitful. God is doing a work in and through you. So we thank you for being on the show, being with us today on the show. Love you guys so much. Have a great day.